I was 35 when the war finally let me go, or at least that's what I told myself. After 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq, and a handful of missions that never officially happened, I came home to the kind of life most men dream about. A big house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, a manicured lawn I never cared about, a wife everyone envied. My name's Ethan Rivers, born and raised in Texas, son of a mechanic and a school teacher. Nothing special, at least that's how I'd like people to think. The truth? People like me don't just come home and become ordinary. We don't just flip a switch and forget who we were. I tried. God knows I tried. When I met Claire, I believed she was my chance at something real, something clean. She had this laugh that could cut through the static in my head and eyes that made me forget the sand and blood. We got married fast, too fast, maybe, but at the time, it felt right. She gave me what the army never could. Peace, or so I thought. From the outside, we looked like any other couple in our neighborhood. Cookouts on weekends, dinner with her father, the Honorable Judge Robert Hayden, pictures on the mantle, a golden retriever at our feet. Picture-perfect America. People would look at us and think, they've got it all. What they didn't know was that I didn't belong there. Not really. I'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, hearing things that weren't there, boots in sand, distant gunfire, voices in the dark. Claire slept beside me, soft breaths, the glow of her phone screen sometimes lighting her face when she thought I was out cold. I told myself it was nothing. I wanted to believe that, but soldiers know. We notice patterns. We sense when something's off, and something about Claire shifted. It started small, a new perfume I didn't recognize. Extra hours at her yoga class, more smiles at her phone than at me. I told myself I was paranoid. Old habits. But paranoia keeps you alive. One night she left her phone on the nightstand while she showered. It lit up with a message. Just a first name. Mark. The kind of name that doesn't sound dangerous until you start digging. I didn't touch the phone. Not then. I just stared at it while the water ran in the bathroom and felt something inside me click back into place. That part of me I'd tried to bury, the one that knew how to watch, how to wait, how to strike, woke up like it had been sleeping with one eye open this whole time. The next day, I sat on our porch, sipping coffee like any other suburban husband, watching kids ride their bikes down the street. But my mind wasn't on the kids, or the lawn, or the neighbors waving at me from across the road. It was on Claire, on Mark, on the question that had been burning through my skull since last night. Who the hell do you think you're playing with? People think revenge is loud, screaming, breaking things, throwing punches. That's amateur hour. Real revenge, the kind that lasts, starts quiet. It starts with a question. What do they want most? And then you take it away. Piece by piece. I didn't confront Claire, not when I saw the first message, not when I saw the second, and not when she started wearing lipstick to yoga. No shouting matches, no tears on the kitchen floor. That's not my style. Instead, I bought her flowers. Took her out to dinner, kissed her forehead when she said she was meeting friends. I smiled when she walked out the door. I smiled because I knew I wasn't losing control. I was taking it back. At first, I just wanted confirmation, something undeniable. So, I followed her. 2 nights later, she drove across town to a little bar that smelled like spilled beer and bad decisions. I sat in my truck 2 blocks away, sipping black coffee from a thermos while the Texas night wrapped around me like an old, familiar jacket. I watched through the tinted glass as she walked inside. 10 minutes later, he showed up. Tall, broad shoulders, easy grin, the kind of man women say is safe, but who can't wait to prove how dangerous he is. They didn't kiss, not at first, but they didn't need to. I knew that look. I'd seen it before, in the desert, when a guy stares at water after days without a drop. His name was Mark Collins, local PD 38, divorced, a few commendations, nothing major, clean record, or so it looked on paper. I didn't trust paper. For 3 weeks I tracked them, their meetings, their texts, the hotels where they thought no one was watching. I learned their routines better than they knew each other. Mark liked bourbon and poker nights. Claire liked secrecy, but she wasn't as good at it as she thought. During the day, I dug deeper into Mark. Cops leave fingerprints everywhere. They just call them reports. He'd been sniffing around a case involving a judge. Judge Robert Hayden. My father-in-law. That set off alarms I hadn't heard in years. I'd been trying to live like a man with no enemies. But enemies have a way of finding you, even when you're wearing a wedding ring. One night, I intercepted a call, not between Claire and Mark, but between Mark and someone else. Male voice, rough, older, no names, just business. "You'll get your cut," the man said. "Judge signs off, it's clean." Judge, sign off, clean. That wasn't just adultery I was smelling. That was rot. Deep and old. I started pulling threads, bank transfers that didn't make sense, court rulings that bent the law in ways that felt expensive, and every string I pulled led back to Robert Hayden, Claire's daddy. The same man who toasted me at our wedding, told me I was the best thing that ever happened to his little girl. Funny thing about fathers, they'll kill for their daughters, or die because of them. The night I decided to make my move, Claire kissed me on the cheek before heading out to see friends. I kissed her back and told her to drive safe. She had no idea that I'd already packed a bag. Gloves, zip ties. A burner phone. And the gun. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel betrayed. What I felt was clarity. The same clarity I had crawling through enemy compounds under blacked-out skies. The mission comes first. And tonight, the mission was simple. Take Mark Collins off the board. Find out who's really pulling the strings. The funny thing about people like me, we don't start wars, but we sure as hell know how to end them. The night I went for Mark, the air felt different. Heavy, like the world was holding its breath. I parked my truck a block away from his apartment complex and sat there for a minute, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. My hands rested on the steering wheel, calm, steady. That's how I knew I was ready. Mark had a routine. Finish his shift, grab a burger, pour himself 2 fingers of bourbon, and watch sports highlights until his eyes gave up. That night was no different, except he didn't know someone was watching. I slipped through the shadows like I used to in Kandahar alleys, moving low, quiet. Every sound was amplified. The hum of a streetlight, a dog barking 3 blocks away, the faint buzz of a TV through Mark's window. When he opened the door to take out his trash, I was already there. One quick shove and the door swung wide. He hit the floor hard. Before he could even curse, I had the barrel of my Glock pressed behind his ear. "Stay quiet," I said, voice flat. "You do that, and maybe you walk out breathing." He froze. They always do when they hear that tone. That tone means you're not bluffing. Plastic zip ties, duct tape. In under 30 seconds, Mark Collins was on his knees, wrists bound, mouth gagged. I dragged him into his own kitchen chair, sat him down, and tilted his head back so he'd look at me. Up close, he wasn't so charming, sweat on his temple. Eyes wide, darting. Fear has a smell, bitter, metallic. I've smelled it on 100 men before him. "You know who I am?" I asked. He shook his head. "You should. You've been screwing my wife." His eyes flickered. Shock, then guilt, then something else. Resignation, like he'd seen this coming. I leaned in. "Here's the part you don't get, Mark. I don't care about her. Not anymore. What I care about is why a local cop is making late-night calls about judges and clean sign-offs." That hit him. He tried to swallow, but the tape made it hard. "Yeah," I said softly, almost kindly. "You thought she was just bored. That's cute. But you're in deeper shit than you know." I pulled the tape off his mouth. He hissed in pain, then spat blood onto his floor. "You don't understand," he rasped. "You think this is about her? You think you know what you're in the middle of?" I smiled. "Enlighten me." He looked at me, jaw clenched. Then he said one name. Just one. Maddox. The room felt colder. I hadn't heard that name in years. Vince Maddox. A ghost from my past? No. Worse. A name you hear whispered in rooms where men talk about power like it's currency. Organized crime, political strings, blood money. Maddox didn't just own criminals. He owned pieces of cities. "Your judge father-in-law," Mark said, his voice shaking. "He's not what you think. He's in this up to his neck. And if you come for Maddox—" He laughed once, bitter and broken. "You won't live long enough to regret it." I stepped back, processing. Pieces were falling into place faster than I wanted. Claire, Mark, Robert, Hayden, and now Maddox. "You're going to tell me everything," I said. But before he could answer, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a number I didn't recognize. Burner. That meant one thing. Someone knew. Someone was watching me while I was watching them. I answered. Silence, then a voice, smooth as oil. "Ethan, I was wondering when you'd stop pretending to be normal." Click. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the weight of it in my hand like a live grenade. Whoever that was, they knew my name. My real name, and they just declared this wasn't a domestic problem anymore. This was war. "Behind me," Mark whispered. "You're in way over your head, soldier." I turned back to him, calm again. "No, Mark," I said, picking up the duct tape. "This is where I'm most comfortable." I kept Mark alive longer than I should have. Maybe part of me wanted answers. Maybe part of me wanted someone to blame other than myself. By the time the sun came up, I had enough. Enough names, enough connections, enough dirt to burn half the city down. And one truth I couldn't ignore. Maddox wasn't just a name in the shadows. He was the architect of everything. The bribes, the cases Robert Hayden signed off on, the money that flowed like poison through the veins of this city. Claire wasn't innocent, not completely. She wasn't part of Maddox's empire, but she played her own little game. She wanted passion, danger. She found it in Mark, and because of that, because of them, the monster I'd buried crawled out again. I called Robert Hayden, told him we needed to talk. The man who once toasted my marriage sounded like a defendant waiting on a verdict. He tried to play dumb at first. Then I mentioned Maddox, and the color drained from his voice. "I can fix this," he said. His voice shook like a man holding a gun to his own head. "No," I told him, "you can't." 2 nights later, Maddox sent for me. No cops, no lawyers, no FBI. Just a message delivered the old-fashioned way. An envelope under my door with an address and one word. Tonight. The pier was quiet when I got there. Wind off the water carried the stench of salt and oil. Old warehouses loomed like skeletons, their windows black and broken. I parked 100 yards out and walked the rest, Glock at my side, silencer screwed on like an afterthought. He was waiting for me. Vince Maddox. 50, maybe more, dressed like he'd stepped out of a boardroom instead of a crime scene. 2 men flanked him, muscle, armed, and behind them, Claire. Her hands were tied, tape over her mouth. Her eyes found mine, wide, wet, full of questions. Questions I didn't have time to answer. Maddox smiled like a man who'd already won. "Mr. Rivers," he said smoothly. "Or do you still go by Ethan? Hard to keep track of a man with so many skill sets." "Let her go," I said. He chuckled. "You know, when your wife first started playing house with Officer Collins, I thought, what a boring little story. But then your name crossed my desk, and suddenly it wasn't boring anymore. "You're a problem, Ethan. Men like you always are. You think you're wolves in a world of sheep. But wolves bleed like everyone else." He nodded once. One of his men shoved Claire forward. She stumbled. Maddox stepped closer, his cologne sharp and expensive. "You could have stayed retired," he said softly, "but you came back into the dark, and in the dark, I'm God." I shot the first man before the word left his mouth. 2 suppressed pops, and he crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. The second went for his gun. I put one in his throat and one in his skull before he hit the deck. Claire screamed through the tape. Maddox didn't move. He just stared at me, fury flickering behind those cold black eyes. "Do you know how many judges, senators, cops owe me their lives?" he hissed. I stepped closer, gun leveled at his chest. "Do you know how many men I've buried for less than what you've done?" His hand twitched like he might reach for something. He never got the chance. One shot, center mass. He staggered back, blood blooming through his $1,000 suit, and collapsed into the dark water with barely a splash. For a moment, there was only the sound of the tide lapping against the pier. Then I cut Claire loose. She fell against me, sobbing into my shoulder. "Ethan," she whispered, "please, let's just go home. We can fix this." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I thought I loved, the life I thought I wanted. A house, a dog, a quiet street. All of it felt like a photograph someone else had taken. "There's no home," I said finally. "Not for me." I walked her to the edge of the lot where flashing blue lights were already painting the night. I'd called it in before I left the house, an anonymous tip. The cops would find Maddox's empire in flames by sunrise. They'd take Claire home. They'd question Robert Hayden. They'd never find me. By dawn, I was already gone. Sitting in a private hangar, watching the Gulf shrink to a thin blue line. My phone buzzed. "Unknown number," I answered, a woman's voice this time. Calm, precise. "Mr. Rivers, we've been watching. There are bad people out there. Worse than Maddox. We'd like you to help us. Remove them." I didn't answer right away, just stared out at the horizon. Freedom, or something that looked like it. Finally, I said, "Send me the names." I hung up as the plane lifted into the clouds. Below me, the world kept spinning. The suburbs, the pier, the blood on the boards. They all disappeared into the gray. I tried to build a life, tried to be a man who could sit at a kitchen table and talk about the weather. But the truth is simple. Men like me don't retire. We just change battlefields. And somewhere out there, the war was waiting. Life doesn't always turn out the way we dream it will. Sometimes the people we love the most carry secrets we can't imagine. Sometimes we make choices that change everything. And there's no going back. This story isn't just about betrayal or revenge. It's about survival, about how, no matter what happens, we should never forget what makes us human. If this story made you think, if it made you feel something, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. On this channel, you'll find many more powerful stories, real stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. Don't miss them. Thank you for watching, and remember, life is never as simple as it seems.